Imagine a drop, not of water, but of something so potent, so tiny, that a dose smaller than a grain of sand can send your mind into orbit. It goes by many names: acid, Lucy, sunshine. Some call it the key to the subconscious, others call it Pandora's box. For decades, artists, scientists, and seekers alike have been drawn to it, hoping to crack open new doors in their minds. Author Ken Kesey once said that acid didn't just alter perception, it offered a new language for thinking. But behind the bright colors, warped realities, and tales of epiphanies hides a serious question. What actually happens inside your body when LSD takes hold? This isn't just about trippy visuals or melting walls. This is about biology being rewritten, neurons speaking in new dialects, senses crossing wires, and the brain itself struggling to understand what's real. So let's step into the microscopic world of LSD, how it works, why it feels so otherworldly, and what it reveals about the deepest layers of our consciousness. Because once you go inside the chemistry, it's not just your vision that shifts, it's your very idea of self. But to understand how something so tiny can bend our entire perception, we need to start where it all began, with a fungus and an accident. Not all revolutions begin with a war. Some begin with a sneeze. Or, more precisely, with mold. In 1938, Swiss chemist Albert Hofmann was tinkering with compounds derived from ergot, a toxic fungus that grows on rye. Ergot had a dark history. It once caused mass poisonings in medieval villages. But Hofmann wasn't interested in folklore. He was looking for something that could stimulate the circulatory system. Among dozens of synthesized compounds, one caught his eye: lysergic acid diethylamide 25, or LSD 25. But the molecule seemed unremarkable, so it was shelved and forgotten. Until 5 years later, on an April day in 1943, Hofmann decided to revisit LSD 25 out of scientific curiosity, or perhaps intuition. What happened next was entirely accidental. A microscopic amount of the substance was absorbed through his skin. And then, his world changed. Colors danced, shapes shimmered, reality folded in on itself. Unsure of what was happening, Hofmann took the first intentional LSD trip days later on a bicycle ride home. The street twisted, trees breathed, time unraveled. It was science fiction made real, powered by a molecule no larger than a dust mote. His discovery would echo far beyond that quiet Swiss laboratory. By the 1952nd, LSD was the subject of intense psychiatric research. Therapists believed it could treat depression, addiction, even unlock spiritual awakening. By the 1962nd, it had spilled into music, art, and youth culture. LSD became a symbol for freedom of thought, or for chaos, depending on who you asked. But the same compound that fascinated researchers also unsettled governments. By 1970, LSD was classified as a Schedule I drug in the United States, deemed dangerous with no accepted medical use. From accidental discovery to global controversy, LSD's journey mirrors our own uneasy relationship with the mind. How far are we willing to go to understand it? But before LSD could spark cultural revolutions or political fear, it had to first make its way inside us and change how the body works from the inside out. Shall we look closer? LSD isn't swallowed like a pill or brewed like tea. It's more like a whisper to your nervous system delivered with precision. In its pure form, LSD is a crystalline compound so small and potent that doses are measured not in milligrams, but in micrograms, millionths of a gram. That's like slicing a single grain of sugar into 10,000 pieces and still feeling the universe shift. But how do we actually take it? Most commonly, LSD arrives soaked into tiny pieces of blotter paper, slipped under the tongue. Other forms include drops of liquid, tablets, sugar cubes, or gelatin squares. Regardless of the packaging, the idea is the same. Absorb the molecule through the soft tissues of your mouth or send it on a journey through your digestive system. From there, the compound enters your bloodstream. Within 30 to 60 minutes, it begins to sneak past the body's biological defenses, slipping through membranes, passing the liver, arriving at the brain. And then, things start to bend. You don't just feel high, You feel like your operating system has been rewritten. Thoughts take unexpected turns. Colors feel louder. Time stretches and folds in strange ways. Why? Because LSD isn't like alcohol or nicotine. It doesn't just dull or excite you, it changes how your brain interprets the world itself. What's remarkable is that all of this begins with just a drop. A drop small enough to hide on a stamp, but powerful enough to turn a bedroom into a cathedral, a thought into a galaxy, or fear into a mythic beast. But how exactly does that drop change the machinery of your brain? Let's look at what happens when LSD collides with your neurons. Your brain is a conductor quietly orchestrating trillions of signals every second. Thoughts, memories, emotions, movements, each following invisible instructions through a vast web of neurons. But when LSD enters the scene, that symphony goes rogue. At the core of this chaos is a single receptor, 5-HT2-ampere, one of many docking stations for serotonin, the neurotransmitter often called the brain's mood molecule. Normally, serotonin behaves like a courteous guest. It knocks, delivers its message, and leaves. The receptor resets, ready for the next signal. LSD, however, is no ordinary guest. It doesn't knock. It barges in, locks itself inside the receptor, and refuses to leave. Instead of a short, sharp message, the receptor becomes stuck in the on position, firing signal after signal, hour after hour. This overstimulation ripples outward, creating an electrical cascade that affects not just mood, but motion, memory, body temperature, even your sense of self. It doesn't stop there. LSD also nudges dopamine receptors, those linked to reward and pleasure, further amplifying emotions, intensifying attention, and increasing heart rate and blood pressure. But the real magic, or madness, happens deeper. When scientists scanned brains under LSD, they saw something astonishing. Regions that normally operate separately began lighting up in synchrony. Like isolated islands suddenly connected by glowing bridges, ideas and sensations began to overlap in unexpected ways. This hyperconnectivity helps explain why thoughts feel more profound, emotions more vivid, and ordinary experiences more cosmic. But it also explains why LSD isn't just a high, it's a total neurological remix. And once this remix begins, reality doesn't just feel different. It becomes different, built from the same parts, but rearranged by a molecule with a stubborn grip. But what happens when these new connections blur the boundaries between senses, thoughts, and identity itself? Let's step into the psychedelic realm of perception. Close your eyes. What do you see? Under normal conditions, just darkness, maybe the ghost of a memory. But under LSD, close your eyes and the universe might bloom behind your eyelids. Why? Because one of the brain's most critical functions is to filter to decide what sensory data gets through and what gets silenced. This filter is managed, in part, by a region called the thalamus, a kind of traffic controller that routes information between the outside world and your conscious mind. When LSD enters the picture, this gatekeeper loses control. Suddenly, everything gets in. The rustle of leaves, the flicker of light, the heartbeat in your chest, all amplified, interconnected, and streaming into your awareness simultaneously. You're not just seeing colors, you're hearing them. Not just hearing music, you're feeling it move through your skin. This neurological overlap is called synesthesia, and it's one of the most iconic effects of LSD. In a normal brain, sensory areas are like individual rooms in a house. On LSD, those walls crumble. A smell might spark a memory, which becomes a shape, which becomes a sound. The boundaries melt, and so do you. Even in silence and darkness, the mind doesn't rest. Instead, it generates its own reality hallucinations, not just layered on top of the world, but built from within you. For some, this leads to awe. For others, to confusion. For a few, to terror. But most report something harder to describe. A sense that the I, the self, is dissolving. The usual lines between you and everything else blur. Time becomes fluid. Space feels irrelevant. You might feel like you're floating outside your body, watching from above, or like you've become part of the trees, the sky. the pulse of existence itself. It's not a dream, it's not even fantasy. It's a radically different mode of consciousness, brought on by a molecule with no ego, but the power to strip yours away. But for all the mind-bending wonder, LSD isn't all imagination and light. It also stirs real, measurable changes in the body. And not all of them are pleasant. Shall we take a look under the skin? While your mind floats through shifting colors and echoing thoughts, your body anchored to biology has its own story to tell. Because LSD doesn't just transform perception, it also flips switches in the systems that keep you alive: heart, lungs, digestion, muscles. And these effects can be subtle or surprisingly intense. For starters, your heart speeds up. Not from fear or adrenaline, but because LSD nudges the release of dopamine and norepinephrine chemicals that trigger alertness and movement. Your blood pressure climbs, your pupils dilate, your skin grows warm and damp with sweat. Your eyes may struggle to focus, not because of light, but because too much light is pouring in. The world might feel sharper, brighter, almost electric. This overload doesn't stop at vision. It stretches into your stomach, sometimes causing nausea, loss of appetite, or even digestive spasms. And balance? That becomes a suggestion, not a certainty. You may feel your limbs like rubber bands, your walk like a dream. Even reaching for a glass of water might feel like decoding a puzzle. LSD doesn't just scramble thoughts, it muddles motion by interfering with motor coordination and body awareness. For most people, these symptoms are temporary and manageable. But in rare cases, especially with high doses or unstable environments, the experience can spiral into confusion, paranoia, or even psychotic episodes, commonly known as a bad trip. Even after the substance leaves the bloodstream, its effects can linger. Some users report unexpected flashbacks, visual distortions, or sensory echoes days or weeks later, a condition known as HPPD, hallucinogen persisting perception disorder. Importantly, LSD is not addictive in the traditional sense. It doesn't hijack the brain's reward center like opioids or nicotine. It doesn't trigger intense cravings or withdrawal. But that doesn't mean it's harmless. The real risk lies not in losing control of your body, but in losing your grip on reality and not being ready for what you might find there. Still, in controlled doses and intentional use, some believe LSD holds promise not as an escape, but as a tool. Let's talk about that next. What if the key to focus, creativity, and emotional balance wasn't a miracle app or a meditation retreat, but just a sliver of a psychedelic? Enter microdosing. The practice of taking LSD in doses so small, they don't launch you into cosmic spirals or make the walls breathe. Instead, they aim for something quieter, a subtle tilt in perception, barely noticeable, yet potentially powerful. A typical microdose is around 10 micrograms, roughly 1/10 of a recreational trip. At that level, you don't see colors swirling or feel one with the stars. Instead, users report feeling more present, more curious, or more emotionally open. Some describe it as turning the volume up on attention, creativity, and clarity without the chaos. Sounds too good to be true? That's what scientists thought until recent studies began to catch up. In surveys and small clinical trials, people who microdose LSD over days or weeks have reported a range of effects: decreased anxiety and depression, increased productivity and motivation, heightened empathy, and even improved sleep. Others claimed it helped with chronic conditions like migraines or PMDD, though research in those areas is still early. What's fascinating is that even in these tiny amounts, LSD appears to gently loosen the brain's internal filters. Not enough to cause hallucinations, but just enough to let in new connections. Ideas spark faster, emotions process more smoothly, patterns become more visible. Of course, not everyone benefits equally, and microdosing isn't without controversy. Placebo effects loom large, and long-term safety is still being studied. Still, in a world desperate for meaning, energy, and mental health tools that work without side effects, the idea of rebooting your brain with trace amounts of a once-feared psychedelic has captivated a generation. Not to escape, but perhaps to reconnect. but not all uses of LSD have been so voluntary or so hopeful. Let's turn to one of the darkest chapters in psychedelic history. Not every story about LSD is one of wonder or healing. Some chapters are darker, more shadow than spectrum. In the 1952nd, during the Cold War's fog of paranoia, the US government looked at LSD and didn't see self-discovery or therapy. It saw a tool, or more precisely, a weapon. Enter Project Ultra, a covert CIA program designed to explore mind control, behavioral manipulation, and psychological warfare. Its aim? To discover how substances like LSD could be used to break a person's will, extract secrets, or even erase identity. The methods were anything but scientific. Over the course of 2 decades, the CIA secretly dosed hundreds of individuals without consent. Prisoners, mental patients, sex workers, ordinary civilians, people who were offered a drink, or injected while unconscious, or coerced into experiments that sometimes lasted weeks. In one documented case, a participant was given LSD daily for 77 days straight. The results were messy, traumatic, and ethically horrifying. Some subjects suffered permanent psychological damage. Others never knew they were part of an experiment at all. The irony? Ultra failed to deliver any reliable mind control breakthroughs. But it succeeded in one thing, proving how easily science can be twisted by fear and power. LSD, a molecule with the power to open minds, had been weaponized to shut them down. When M-Culture was finally exposed in the 1972nd, it sparked outrage, but many of the records had already been destroyed. The full extent of the damage remains a mystery. This chapter of LSD's history is a chilling reminder. Science without ethics isn't progress, it's manipulation. But LSD's story didn't end there. Despite this betrayal, the molecule would quietly return not in the shadows, but under the microscope. And this time, it came with hope. Shall we explore what LSD's future might look like? Decades after being buried under scandal, stigma, and surveillance, LSD is quietly stepping back into the light, not as a party drug or a government weapon, but as a subject of serious science. In research labs across the world, scientists are dusting off old questions with new tools. Can LSD help people suffering from depression, anxiety, or trauma? Can it loosen the grip of addiction? Can it offer relief when traditional medications fail? Early studies suggest the answer might be yes. Guided therapy sessions with small, controlled doses have shown promise. Patients describe not just emotional release, but a sense of perspective, like stepping outside their pain long enough to see it differently. Governments are beginning to notice. In the US, the FDA has released new guidelines for psychedelic research. Clinical trials using LSD are once again legal. In Oregon, small-scale possession has been decriminalized. Other countries like Portugal, Switzerland, and Mexico are exploring similar paths. It's a cautious return, but a real one. Even outside the lab, the conversation is shifting. Online communities for microdosing, harm reduction, and psychedelic integration have emerged not to glamorize LSD, but to handle it with respect, intention, and information. We're no longer asking, can this substance make you trip? We're asking, can it help you heal? The stigma remains, so do the risks. But the door is open just a crack, and behind it might be one of the most powerful tools for mental health we've overlooked for generations. But with a molecule that powerful, there's always a deeper question. Let's end where it matters most. Not in the science, but in the self. LSD isn't just a chemical. It's a mirror. Not the kind that shows your face, but the kind that shows your fears, your memories, your questions, and maybe your potential. It doesn't fix you. It doesn't enlighten you. It doesn't make problems vanish. What it does is turn the volume up on everything you already are. It cracks open the familiar, peels back the noise, and asks, are you ready to look deeper? That's why some people emerge from a trip feeling reborn, while others feel broken. Why one person finds peace and another finds panic. Because what LSD reflects back isn't truth, it's you. Unfiltered, amplified, rearranged. And that's the real question. Not whether LSD is good or bad, not whether it should be legal or banned, but whether we're prepared for the responsibility of exploring our own minds. In the end, psychedelics don't give us answers. They give us better questions. And maybe that's enough.